Out of all the old school PC gamers in the world, there's always one game you'd hear these people talking about, and I think that game is System Shock 2. Developed by Looking Glass Studios, it was a frightening tale set on a claustrophobic space station as you played the role of a hacker stricken with amnesia, who awakens from hypersleep to find the place overrun with monsters and an evil AI system known as SHODAN.
I am SHODAN.
Now, credit where credit is due, System Shock was a fascinating game and it's one of the best of its era, and I always thought it was kind of strange how you didn't really ever hear people talking about the first game. Well, now they might, because good old Night Dive Studios have again returned with another remaster in the form of System Shock Enhanced Edition. This is a remaster that allows the game to run on modern operating systems and also run at a whopping 1024x768 resolution, making the game much more visually appealing. The widescreen mode would have been neat, but it still does look pretty good all the same. The art style I think is very appealing, almost 20 years since its original release. For the purists, the original game is held entirely intact with practically nothing changed, and this is on the whole an awesome update to a lesser known PC classic. So in System Shock you take on the role of a nameless hacker, busted by the Trioptium Corporation after you're caught messing around in their computer systems. Instead of being sent to jail, you're instead sent to Citadel Station to hack into the AI system SHODAN to recover some sort of top secret virus. After the job is done, the hacker is given a series of cybernetic implants and wakes up 6 months later to find the station has gone to shit and SHODAN has either killed everyone or turned them into cyborgs or mutants. Horribly hideous mutants that'll haunt your dreams and crush your aspirations. SHODAN really steals the show here. The voice acting is just downright unsettling, and seeing a face pop up around the station is pretty spooky.
Goodbye, irritant. We shall not meet again.
Anyway, your first main objective is to blow up a laser that SHODAN plans to use to destroy Earth. Then from there you complete a few other tasks before tracking down and killing SHODAN herself.
The modulator replacement successful.
Now, System Shock doesn't quite have the customization its sequel has. In fact, all of the upgrades the player receives are all preset and the same across each playthrough, but one thing the game does quite well is drop you into this large, explorable space station with practically no hand-holding. Pretty much from the get-go, you're in this very expansive and often cramped space station given very little bearing on where you need to go and also just what you're even supposed to be doing. The most important thing this enhanced edition does is improve the control scheme, but even then it can still be initially very confusing and complex. Anyone who's played games like Realms of the Haunting or Ultima Underworld will be comfortable with the setup, but other people will probably need a bit of time to get used to everything. So I'll do my best to explain how it works. To put it simply, System Shock's controls are a combination of point and click with standard first-person shooting. You can snap back and forth between a mode where the cursor moves around the screen freely, allowing you to pick up items and interact with objects, and a second mode which is your basic mouse aiming, ideally used for shooting at enemies and moving around the environment. The left mouse button is used for every form of environmental interaction, and the right mouse button is used for firing your weapon. If that's not confusing enough, you've also got to toggle back and forth between multiple interfaces, all of which contain important and often crucial items. Your inventory, for instance, is broken up between weapons, logs, and emails that you pick up, and lastly, one-off items like first aid kits and energy batteries. To reload a weapon, you have to switch back from mouse aim to mouse cursor mode, and then click a little reloading icon at the bottom of the screen. Throwing grenades, for instance, requires clicking through to your items menu, holding down the left mouse button on the grenade you want to throw, then throwing it with the right mouse button. If this is sounding confusing, that's because it is, and it's truly one of the factors that makes System Shock a hard game for newcomers to get into. I mean, this kind of thing is archaic in every sense of the word. And if you think that's bad, now consider the original version didn't even have this setup and required an even more confusing mix of keyboard and mouse. The first 30 minutes of the game can be a confusing mess of trial and error, but my advice here is just to stick with it. After you become comfortable with switching back and forth between these two control schemes, the game becomes a lot easier and more importantly, enjoyable. After about an hour or so of playing, you can expect your inventory to be full of useful and less useful items and weapons, so you really need to start deciding whether or not it's worth hoarding all these energy batteries or swapping out that right gun for an assault rifle. You start off with a lead pipe before getting a dart gun, then a pistol, an assault rifle, and a machine gun, and then some energy-based weapons as well, which can overheat if used too much. This is a very action-orientated game, and it can be common to have 3 or 4 enemy types attacking you at once. Getting the grasp of the controls early on is essential, as during these moments you die really easily. Luckily though, you can save whenever you want, so it is a bit generous in that regard. Also, your standard ammo is quite abundant, so you'll likely not run out of ammo unless your aiming sucks. Single-use items like combat boosters and stamina stimulants can also improve your damage with the pipe and replenish your fatigue, but also come with after effects like bizarre hallucinations with the combat booster and greater fatigue with the stamina stimulants. There's just so many things you can mess around with in this game, and it really was light years ahead of most other FPS games at the time. There's some cool little hacking minigames which are essential to progression, and I also enjoy listening to all of the audio logs and reading people's emails, often which again are essential to progression, containing important key codes or information. Probably the most original mechanic is the way you can jack into computer systems and fly around this fully 3D wire-scale environment, collecting data fragments and objects, interacting with nodes and modules that affect areas on the station. To be honest though, it can often be a little bit too complex for its own good. As I said before, the game has practically no hand-holding, which is fine and dandy if you're a patient kind of person, which I am, but this does mean that the game can be difficult to recommend to other people. There are times in this game when you really can be utterly lost and just have no sense of what the hell you're supposed to be doing. The game constantly respawns enemies, and if you get stuck in a particular area for too long, eventually you're going to be stretched pretty thin on resources and not in the best spot. This was the same thing that happened in System Shock 2, and it can really piss you off when you're just trying to find your way out of an area or solve your objective, but you have to constantly deal with these bullet sponge asshole enemies that just don't stop popping up. The version sold on goodoldgames.com does come with a strategy guide if you're really stuck, which, let's face it, is bound to happen eventually. I also found that combat in general can be a bit lackluster at times, mostly because the majority of enemy types don't fire projectiles, and simply being in their line of sight is enough for them to dish out some serious damage. All of the 7 levels of Citadel Station have respawning stations, or what the game calls cyborg conversion chambers, that you can activate, but before you've got these up and running, getting killed means you have to watch this nightmare-inducing cinematic of your character getting turned into a cyborg before getting thrown back to the main menu. It does feel a little bit weird using healing items when you've got these stations up and running, as you can respawn without any penalty and with a full health bar. It's often easier and sometimes even time-saving to let yourself get killed if a conversion chamber is closer to where you're heading. It is kind of hard and also unfair to knock mechanics like this because it really is just a product of its time. But again, as I said, it harks back to how archaic the game feels, and all the remastered versions in the world aren't really going to change what truly is dated gameplay. And that's why I don't think you hear people talking about this game as much as they do the sequel, which is generally just the same game, but with vastly improved mechanics and more replayability due to the psionic abilities. But look, the most important thing here is that Night Dive Studios have again hit an absolute home run with this remaster. They've knocked it out of the park, Sunny Jim. For people who played the original game all those years ago, this is a great nostalgia trip with a much improved control scheme and upgraded visuals. And for people who haven't played the game, it can be a little bit more accessible now for those very same reasons. And if you've ever wanted to see where games like Deus Ex and Bioshock took all their influences, then this is it. It's now available on goodoldgames.com for the paltry price of $10.